A Bible Commentary on the Book of Daniel. By Brian Pepper. Chapter 4. Daniel chapter 4 verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all people, nations, languages, that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. This chapter is a public document written by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon after his humiliation by the God of heaven. It is a message of goodwill, for it reflects the king's feelings when his full mental powers had been restored. Daniel chapter 4 verse 2. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. The king wishes to share the experience and its lessons with all his subjects. Notice this statement from the book Prophets and Kings by Ellen G. White, page 521. The once proud monarch had become a humble child of God. He who had defied and blasphemed the God of heaven, now acknowledged the power of the Most High, and earnestly sought to promote the fear of Jehovah and the happiness of his subjects. Under the rebuke of him who is King of kings and Lord of lords, Nebuchadnezzar had learned at last the lesson which all rulers need to learn, that true greatness consists in true goodness. Daniel chapter 4 verse 3. How great are his signs! And how mighty are his wonders! His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. It had taken the king a long time to find out the true greatness of the God of heaven. Now he is willing to testify of that greatness. Daniel chapter 4 verse 4. I Nebuchadnezzar was at rest in mine house, and flourishing in my palace. Nebuchadnezzar's reign had been one long scene of warfare. He was a man of war. This characteristic was prominent in the life of the great king. The prophecy calls him, the terrible of the nations, and the hammer of the whole earth. He had met foes on every side and had been successful because God had, as the scripture says, put his sword into the hand of the king of Babylon, and made use of this monarch to punish other nations which refused the light of truth. Daniel chapter 4 verse 5. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. God has a special message for this man. Once again he uses a dream to warn the king of impending judgment. Daniel chapter 4 verse 6. Therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Evidently the king still had some confidence in his wise men, for he brought them into the palace to explain his dream. This time it was a much easier matter, for the king remembered what his dream was all about. Daniel chapter 4 verse 7. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, and I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. Seeing that the dream was uncomplicated and simple, it is possible that the wise men may have understood the dream, or at least parts of it. But usually these men flattered their monarch and avoided telling him anything that was disagreeable. They would not have the courage to tell the king that the dream might not be very agreeable as far as he was concerned. If they did offer some sort of explanation of the dream, it certainly did not satisfy the king. They could not give an accurate and detailed interpretation as Daniel did later on. Daniel chapter 4 verse 8. But at last Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and before him I told the dream, saying. Why Daniel had been kept in the background so long, although he is considered master of the magicians, is not explained. Some have suggested that Nebuchadnezzar possibly wanted to find out what the Chaldeans had to say about this extremely disturbing dream, before hearing the full truth, which he suspected was unfavorable as far as he was concerned. In whom is the spirit of the holy gods? This expression reveals that Nebuchadnezzar recognized what it was that gave Daniel superior power and understanding. Daniel chapter 4 verse 9. O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. The king is quite certain that Daniel is able to reveal to him the meaning of the dream, and he knows that Daniel would tell him the truth even if it was not the most encouraging. Daniel chapter 4 verse 10. Thus were the visions of mine head in my bed, I saw, and behold a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof great. The figure of a tree would have impressed Nebuchadnezzar. Whether there were trees of any size around Babylon in his time it would be hard to say. Today mostly palm trees grow in that area. But we learn that Nebuchadnezzar had made repeated expeditions into the forests of Lebanon, and the king personally cut down some of the great cedars in the forests there. Daniel chapter 4 verse 11. The tree grew, and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. Like the great image of his dream recorded in Daniel chapter 2, this tree was of enormous proportions. This of course would greatly impress the king and give him something to think about. Daniel chapter 4 verse 12. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. The ancients were accustomed to seeing a meaning in every extraordinary dream. Most likely this is why God used the agency of a dream on this occasion. Daniel chapter 4 verse 13. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and, behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven. In chapter 3 and verse 28 Nebuchadnezzar mentions that the God of the Hebrews had sent his angel to deliver these men. Nebuchadnezzar had some knowledge of the work of an angel, and in this verse he calls this heavenly being, a watcher, also, an holy one, and uses the phrase, came down from heaven. The word watcher is well applied here, for it suggests a wakeful one or one who is watching on guard. Daniel chapter 4 verse 14. He cried aloud, and said thus, hew down the tree, and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves, and scatter his fruits. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. This great tree with its branches reaching up into heaven was to be cut down. The king would be intrigued by this tree of giant proportions, and that it was a fruit-bearing tree, for the Babylonians were not unfamiliar with the story of the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The story of Eden had been handed down by tradition. The tree seen in the dream was planted in the midst of the earth. As the king watched, it grew until the top reached heaven and its boughs stretched to the ends of the earth. Then at the command of the heavenly one it was cut down, leaving only the stump. Daniel chapter 4 verse 15. Nevertheless leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. To leave the stump of his roots in the earth would seem to signify that the life of the tree was to be preserved. That the stump would throw forth shoots and grow again indicates that the king would recover from his sickness. With a band of iron and brass. Some commentators understand this as metal bands fastened to the root stump to prevent it from cracking or splitting. This indicates that care would be exercised in preserving it. As the tree is a symbol of Nebuchadnezzar, it suggests that his kingdom will be preserved for him through his sickness. Daniel chapter 4 verse 16. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. Let his heart be changed. The heart mentioned here is his nature. Instead of having the nature of a man, he would from now on have the nature of an animal. The disease of the king is known among medical people as lycanthropy. This disease has a long history, and from records of other cases Nebuchadnezzar evidently suffered very mildly. An ancient writer named Megasthenes of about 300 BC tells us that after Nebuchadnezzar became great and powerful, he ascended to the roof of his palace and became possessed by some god, and under inspiration he uttered a warning about the calamities which were to befall the city of Babylon. 7 times is probably 7 years, that is 7 literal years. Daniel chapter 4 verse 17. The matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. What an interest, the holy ones, or angels, take in human affairs. They can see the dangers of pride and lustful ambition. Over and over again they have witnessed the bad results of these things on human lives. It is the desire of the heavenly watchers that man must realize that he is dependent of God for everything. In the case of Nebuchadnezzar, he was a successful monarch, but his pride did not allow him to realize that it was the Most High, the Lord of heaven, who had helped him to reach this high position. Daniel chapter 4 verse 18. This dream I King Nebuchadnezzar have seen, now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof, forasmuch as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in thee. Once again the king has to turn to Daniel to give him an understanding of this unusual dream. He also acknowledges that Daniel has some special power, some special supernatural power that no one else has. Daniel chapter 4 verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonied for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spake, and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream, or the interpretation thereof trouble thee. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. Daniel must have been extremely embarrassed as he realized the significance of the dream, for he hesitated to declare the interpretation to the king. Was astonied for 1 hour. More accurately, for a while, meaning an indefinite period. Daniel was obviously searching for suitable words and expressions by which he could acquaint the king with the terrible news concerning his future fate. The king could see the consternation on Daniel's face, and from the nature of the dream he could hardly have expected to hear something pleasant. Nevertheless, he encouraged his trusted courtier to give him the full truth without fear of incurring royal disfavor. Daniel chapter 4 verse 20. The tree that thou sawest, which grew, and was strong, whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth. The tree illustration was not unknown to the king. The prophet Ezekiel, one of the Hebrew captives, was given a view of the capture of Egypt by Nebuchadnezzar, and was told to send the testimony to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. In this prophecy Egypt is represented as a mighty tree towering above all the trees of the earth. Even the trees of Eden envied the splendor of this tree. All the fowls of heaven nested in its boughs, the hosts of earth dwelt beneath its branches. But this tree of Egypt was lifted up because of its greatness, and God sent Babylon to hew it to the ground. This prophecy must have been known to Nebuchadnezzar, if not before, at least after his victory over Egypt, for it was familiar to the Jews, and there were Jews in the Babylonian court. Daniel chapter 4 verse 21. Whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heaven had their habitation. There is a similarity between the Egyptian tree and the tree of the king's dream, for the fowls rested in its branches and the beasts in its shadows. Daniel chapter 4 verse 22. It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown, and reacheth unto heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth. Without holding the king in suspense for any length of time, Daniel plainly and clearly announced to him that the tree represented the king himself. Thy kingdom reacheth unto heaven. Some have thought that this description of Nebuchadnezzar's greatness is greatly exaggerated. Daniel was using court language and idioms to which both he and the king were accustomed. These terms are remarkably similar to the boastful language of Nebuchadnezzar, exhibited in various of the king's inscriptions discovered by archaeologists. Daniel chapter 4 verse 23. And whereas the king saw a watcher and an holy one coming down from heaven, and saying, Hew the tree down, and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. Daniel reviews the dream for the king's benefit, also to impress the important features upon his mind. Daniel chapter 4 verse 24. This the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my lord the king. Daniel now comes to the most difficult part of the vision. However, without any hesitation he proceeds to describe the meaning of it. Daniel chapter 4 verse 25. That they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. Thou shalt be driven from men. In ancient times, and even today in the East and other non-Christian countries, insane people are not cared for in institutions or even by their relatives. If the king in his madness thought that he was some vegetable-eating animal, like a sheep or an ox, he would be regarded as insane. Thou shalt be made to eat grass as oxen. Persons afflicted with lycanthropy often try to imitate the particular animal which they imagine they have become. They often try to eat the things which such an animal eats, though this would not mean that they actually subsist upon such food. This malady often allows its victims to be lucid and normal at times, the malady only coming on now and then, though no one can tell when it may manifest itself. Daniel chapter 4 verse 26. And whereas they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee, after that thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. Thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee. Many have wondered why the insane king was not killed, or why his subjects and ministers of state did not place someone else on the vacant throne during the time Nebuchadnezzar was insane. The first and foremost reason is that God assured him that his throne would be kept safe. It seems that a regency or guardianship for the kingdom was appointed and the affairs of the empire went on much as usual. Possibly Daniel himself took charge of the situation by assuring the princes of the definite or limited period of the king's madness, thus reserving the kingdom for him on his recovery. There is another reason that preserved the king. The ancients believe that all mental disturbances were caused by evil spirits who took control of their victim, that if someone should kill the insane man, the spirit would take hold of the murderer and a grievous revenge would be inflicted upon those responsible. Daniel chapter 4 verse 27. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. If the king was willing to humble his heart and to respond to the Holy Spirit's pleading, he would be saved from this dreadful fate and great humiliation. By showing mercy to the poor. The king was admonished to practice righteousness towards all of his subjects and to exercise mercy to the oppressed, the miserable and the poor. The king was to be given a year of probation. Daniel chapter 4 verse 28. All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. The king had been warned and was given a full 12 months to make things right. God was very gracious to him, for in contrast the Ninevites were only given 40 days of respite, yet they took advantage of the opportunity, and they and their city was spared. Daniel chapter 4 verse 29. At the end of 12 months he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. His time was up, he had plenty of opportunity to put things right, to take out of his life that pride which had been his stumbling block. Daniel chapter 4 verse 30. The king spake, and said, Is not this great Babylon, that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power, and for the honor of my majesty? Nebuchadnezzar viewed the city possibly from the roof of the famous Hanging Gardens, whose thick and strong foundation walls have been excavated. That I have built. Students of ancient Babylonian history are reminded of these proud words when reading the claims the king makes in his inscriptions, which have been preserved amid the dust and debris of Babylon's ruins. Daniel chapter 4 verse 31. While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee. The time had come for the king's humiliation. A voice from heaven announced the judgment. God with a touch of his finger took away his capability to enjoy the great city of his creating. Daniel chapter 4 verse 32. And they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. There was no excuse for the proud monarch. He had a full year to change his way of life and thus avert the threatened calamity. Daniel chapter 4 verse 33. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. The proud and powerful monarch is forced to step down from his throne and to eat grass like an animal. It should be remembered that in all of his dealings with the king, God was working for the salvation of the ruler and for those who came under his influence. God allowed him to suffer 7 years of deplorable degradation, and then removed it as he had promised. Daniel chapter 4 verse 34. At the end of the days I Nebuchadnezzar lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High. And I praised and honored him that liveth for ever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. At the end of the 7 years God removed his hand of affliction and the king's reason and understanding returned. His first act was to bless the Most High God. He was once more established in the kingdom. During his insanity his son Evil-Merodach is said to have reigned as regent in his stead. Daniel's interpretation of the dream was well understood in the palace, and so the return of Nebuchadnezzar to his kingdom must have been anticipated with interest. I blessed the Most High. It speaks well for the once proud king, that after his dreadful experience, his first desire was to thank God, to praise him as the ever-living one, and to recognize his rulership. Daniel chapter 4 verse 35. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand, or say unto him, What doest thou? It had taken the king a long time to learn this lesson. The confession is marvelous, coming as it did from the mouth of the once proud monarch. The words of the king are very similar to those of Isaiah chapter 40 verse 17. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing, and vanity. Daniel chapter 4 verse 36. At the same time my reason returned unto me, and for the glory of my kingdom, mine honor and brightness returned unto me, and my counselors and my lord sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. And my counselors and my lord sought unto me. The word sought does not necessarily indicate that during the period of his insanity, the king was allowed to wander about in the fields and desert without supervision. When it became known that the king's reason had returned, the regents of state brought him back in order they might restore the government to him again. Daniel chapter 4 verse 37. Now I Nebuchadnezzar praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. Nebuchadnezzar had learned at last the lesson which all rulers need to learn, that true greatness consists in true goodness. The once proud tyrannical monarch became a wise and compassionate king.